Today, we will talk with you about a secret of empires. History books usually talk about victories, conquerors, and borders. But the real question that determines the fate of empires has never been, whom did they defeat? The real question has always been this: how long were they able to pay the price of that power? From Roman legions to the British Navy, from the global bases of modern superpowers, history whispers one thing to us: empires do not maintain cheap armies. Because an empire is not just land, it is constant, expensive, and credible power. And today, we will step right into the heart of this paradox. How do the armies that keep empires standing slowly bring them down? Let's look at history a little differently, more sincerely. As we flip through the pages of the past, we see a truth repeating itself with almost clock-like precision. Whenever an empire began to grow stronger, its army also expanded enormously, not only in size, but also in cost. This was not just a statistical increase. It meant the consumption of vast resources. Whether we think of the ancient Roman legions, the standing armies of early modern Europe, the globe-spanning fleets of Britain, or the superpowers of the 20th century, each of them seemed to devour all available resources. Historical sources clearly show that there has never been a great empire that maintained a cheap army. They always preferred expensive armies, and the reason for this goes far deeper than a simple desire for self-defense. Have you ever thought about why empires invest so heavily in military power? In reality, the issue is not just protecting borders. An empire is a vast control system that governs distant lands and diverse cultures. For this system to survive, the power it projects must always be credible. Empires try to bring together completely different peoples, languages, and cultures under one roof. There is no shared identity that unites everyone, only a rigid hierarchy. And when people do not willingly accept this order, the empire must rely on large and costly armies to preserve its power. Let's start with ancient Rome. Rome did not become a massive empire simply because it loved war. In fact, they believed that in a dangerous world, the most reliable way to ensure stability and security was expansion. For this purpose, they built an extremely professional and expensive system. Soldiers were salaried, received pensions, and were supported by a massive logistics and infrastructure network that connected 3 continents. Why did Rome rely so heavily on its legions? The reason is simple. Without them, Rome would immediately lose control. The legions were not just fighters. They were the glue that held the empire together. From guarding borders to collecting taxes and enforcing laws, everything was possible only because of the army's presence. This mindset did not end with antiquity. It merely changed form and survived into the modern era. Now, let's briefly look at the era of the great European empires. Imagine states like Spain, Portugal, Britain, or France trying to govern territories thousands of kilometers away from their capitals. This was not easy at all. Communication was so slow that distant governors acted almost independently, and local populations never stopped resisting. In such a situation, an empire could never afford to appear weak, because even a small gap could mean the end of everything. For example, the British Empire, which we often associate primarily with trade, was in reality built on absolute military power. The Royal Navy consumed the state's budget like a black hole. Maintaining so many ships, bases, and sailors was extraordinarily expensive. But let's be honest, without that navy, Britain would have collapsed overnight. Trade routes would have been cut off, and rivals would have seized all its territories. Here lies a very interesting and logical point. These expensive armies were not maintained only to fight wars, but also to prevent them. Suppressing a rebellion is more costly than intimidating the other side in advance. A powerful army frightens rivals and reduces their desire to resist. In short, the cost of maintaining power is far lower than the price of losing control. Empires also maintain costly armies because expansion creates new vulnerabilities. Every new territory brings not only wealth, but also risk. Borders stretch longer. Supply lines become thinner. The number of enemies increases. An empire that stops investing in its army while expanding is like a building that adds new floors without strengthening its foundation. History teaches us a very important lesson. The Roman Empire did not collapse because its army was expensive, but because it could no longer afford to maintain that army. When financial collapse and inflation made it impossible to pay soldiers, loyalty disappeared. Mercenaries replaced citizens, and those once impregnable borders became full of holes. There is also a crucial psychological dimension that must not be overlooked. Empires are ruled not only by the sword, but also by perceptions of awe and fear. Shining uniforms, grand parades, and massive fleets all send a message. There is no point in fighting us. This psychological advantage sometimes eliminates the need for real war, because a powerful-looking empire crushes threats before they are even born. That is why, whether it is iron weapons of the ancient world or nuclear arsenals of the modern age, empires spare no expense on military technology. They know that falling even one step behind in this competition can be fatal. In fact, these expensive armies do not only protect the state, they also shape the internal economy, industry, and employment. Over time, the system becomes so structured that all resources are aligned around maintaining military potential. Historical experience shows that global influence requires global power. If a state withdraws its military strength, both its diplomatic credibility and its relationships with allies weaken. That is precisely why countries like the United States maintain a global military presence at enormous cost. However, behind the shiny pages of history, we encounter a darker and more painful truth. Those massive and costly armies are not merely symbols of power. They are also heavy burdens that can destabilize an empire from within and lead it to destruction. Imagine military spending growing faster than revenue, governance becoming harder, and people refusing to carry the burden as taxes rise. The magnificent force that once protected the state gradually turns into a heavy stone dragging it down. In academia, this is called imperial overextension. It means an empire takes on obligations larger than its economic capacity, larger than its own pocket. When this happens, maintaining military superiority becomes physically impossible. Britain's story is a tragic example. Although they emerged victorious from the Second World War, the cost of sustaining such a global empire exceeded their economic strength. As a result, whether they wanted to or not, they had to close bases and grant independence to colonies. Here lies a strange paradox. Empires need these costly armies to survive, but those same armies consume the very resources needed for survival. This is not simply a mistake of any particular state. It is a fundamental problem embedded in the concept of empire itself. The truly interesting question is not why empires spend so much, but how long they can afford to carry this burden. History shows that empires remain at their peak only when they can efficiently convert economic power into military power. As long as this delicate balance is maintained, everything works. But when the cost of sustaining power exceeds the wealth that protects it, decline becomes inevitable. In reality, armies are not the cause of imperial collapse. They are mirrors reflecting an empire's internal health. If a state can no longer pay the cost of its own security, then the end is only a matter of time. From Rome to the modern era, one truth has remained unchanged. To bear the name of an empire, maintaining those expensive armies is essential. Otherwise, they lose their very essence. Thank you for watching us. If this topic was interesting to you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. In the upcoming videos on this channel, we will take a deeper look at history, economics, and the major processes shaping the world. Your opinions are important to us as well. Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, those who understand the past build the future more correctly.